For 200 years, livestock production has helped shape this nation. More than half the meat we produce is exported, and consumers the world over have confidence in it, knowing it's safe, free of disease, and extremely high in quality. In the past 30 years, exporting live animals has become increasingly important as a way for Australian meat to get to overseas consumers. Today we export around 3.5 million sheep a year, close to 1 million cattle, and almost 100,000 goats, with a total export value of about $1 billion per year. Its value to the economy of rural Australia is even greater. But why is there a demand for Australian animals? And why aren't they processed here and exported as meat? Well, in fact, the countries that buy Australian live animals are also markets for Australian exported meat. They need both. Often, Australian meat is a premium, higher value product in those markets, selling through Western-style supermarkets and in the food service sector, whereas meat from live exported Australian animals is affordable to more of the population, helping to satisfy their dietary needs. In some cases, the need for live animals is cultural, with traditional or religious practices requiring live animals as part of important feasts. In many places, the traditional fresh markets that sell meat to consumers don't have the refrigeration required to store imported chilled or frozen meat. And for cattle from the vast stations of Australia's north, live exporting simply makes sense. The tropical markets of Southeast Asia are perfectly placed to complete the job of growing healthy young Australian cattle up to the best size for meat. While some people want the live export industry stopped, claiming that animals suffer during the voyage, their arguments ignore the facts about today's livestock export industry. Striving for good animal welfare has always been essential to this trade. Reaching today's standards has been a process of constant improvement. The industry has been relentless in pursuing greater knowledge through research, investing in better infrastructure and refining its practices, and today Australia's livestock exporting industry has the highest standards for exporting livestock to be found anywhere in the world. It's true that a small number of incidents in the past have had unacceptable consequences, but the lessons learned have been built into today's practices. Those practices are strictly regulated by the Australian Government and are set out in the Australian standards for the export of livestock. Anyone who exports livestock from Australia must be licensed by the Australian Government and keep to those rules.
Animal welfare is obviously vital on board a livestock vessel, not only because we have a moral obligation to protect those animals and to ensure that they're not stressed by the procedure, but also because there's a really strong relationship between animal welfare and product quality. And if we can protect the welfare of animals, we're almost guaranteeing a good quality product at the end.
But the livestock export standards cover every aspect of the process, from selecting, preparing, assembling and transporting animals, right through to disembarkation at foreign ports. At the farms, even before they begin their journey, experienced buyers choose the right animals, making sure each one is fit and healthy and suitable for travel. The next stage in the export process is vital to the animal's well-being for the entire journey. They spend a few days at an export depot registered by the Australian Government with constant access to water and feed. Here they're under constant supervision, inspected daily or more often for any showing signs that they should not travel. Sheep carrying more than an inch of wool will also be shorn.
We shear because without the bulk of the wool, the animals have more room to move around on board. It also ensures that they have the most comfortable voyage and the most comfortable delivery to their destination, because quite often they're going into a much hotter climate.
The animals spend an average of 4 to 7 days here, giving them ample time to settle down, get plenty of rest and feed, and get used to the animals who'll be their companions. Both sheep and cattle adjust to the feed so well that many gain weight during the voyage. A shipment of sheep can be as many as 100,000. For cattle, anything up to $23,000. Vets from the Australian Government's Quarantine Inspection Service supervise operations at the loading, ensuring it's done according to the standards and carefully inspecting the animals, removing any which don't appear fit for export. All vessels must meet strict requirements about the design and size of animal pens, number of animals per pen, ventilation and lighting. There must be ample room to move around and lie down, and continual access to food and water. There's constant supervision by crew trained in stock care, as well as accredited Australian stockmen, and on all sheep voyages to the Middle East, an Australian government approved vet. And there will be those that need extra attention.
We might isolate them out of the pen into a dedicated hospital pen where we can treat them, and they have got much more room for rest and recuperation.
Over 99% of sheep arrive at their destination fit and healthy. For cattle, the figure is 99.9%. Opponents of livestock exporting argue that Australian animals are subject to poor welfare standards in the destination countries. Again, this argument ignores the reality in today's livestock export markets. For sheep and cattle disembarking in the Middle East, the next stop is a feedlot like this, where they'll have constant access to feed, cool, clean water and shade. Here they'll be cared for by trained local stockmen to ensure they stay in great condition before they go to market.
They're running freely, they look strong, they're put on weight during the voyage. I think farmers can be well pleased as to how their stock are being treated.
Cattle from Northern Australia arriving in Southeast Asia go to modern professional feedlots or farms where they'll spend 3 months or more feeding and gaining weight. Australia's livestock export industry works to make sure animals from our country are cared for properly overseas. Training and education for the people who handle our livestock is done by Australian animal welfare experts based in the Middle East and Asia.
If a ship arrives from Australia with sheep on board, I'm usually either on the ship or working in the port, and from there I'm also working with stockmen and sharing ideas and training in feedlots, and we also spend some time with truck drivers ensuring the welfare during loading and unloading.
Our industry is also helping to upgrade facilities where our livestock are housed and handled. And working with local authorities to implement new rules and education campaigns, Australia is helping ensure correct treatment of Australian animals right through to the end consumer. This animal welfare work reaches into every country that imports Australian animals. It's managed by the producer organisation Meat and Livestock Australia and the exporters body LiveCorp.
We've seen great improvements over the last 3 to 5 years, but our investment will continue because we believe that there is still opportunities to improve.
Australia is not the only country exporting livestock to our markets, but only Australia is actively working to improve animal welfare practices and outcomes. The animals we export come from a wide area of this very wide country. Across Australia, thousands of farming families and communities depend directly on the livestock export industry. But through its influence on sheep and cattle prices throughout the country, the trade indirectly contributes to every job in the Australian livestock industry.
If they stop the live exports trade, overnight sheep prices would fall by half, if not more. It would be devastating.
In many remote areas, livestock exporting is literally the difference that makes agriculture and a host of associated businesses viable.
Without it, we wouldn't have a business. And that goes for plenty of other people in the Northern Territory too.
And live cattle export provides one of the only avenues for many Indigenous Australians to generate a living from their traditional land.
This is an industry that sustains this part of Australia, and many families and Aboriginal communities depend on it.
Australia's livestock export industry, supplying quality food to the world, setting the benchmark for animal welfare, and supporting Australian farming families and communities.